right, thank you everybody for joining us. Welcome to What the Dys. We're going to talk about the Dys-diagnoses as we celebrate Learning Disability Awareness Month. So we'll go through dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, and dyscalculia. We have two amazing expert panelists with us today, and they will do their introduction shortly. I'll give you a brief overview into Learnfully, our services, our offerings, and the like. We'll talk about why we celebrate Learning Disability Awareness Month. Again, we'll go into the DISs, what the DIS is, and then talk about our services and Q&A if time permits. If it doesn't, I really am trying to answer the questions live. So if I take an unexpected pause, it's most likely because I am trying to answer your questions and facilitate this amazing webinar all at the same time. So thanks for your patience there. I am Jess Corinne. I am head of educational services here at Learnfully. I started my career as a K-1 classroom educator, super juiced and excited to dive into the classroom. I think at least the two panelists can agree. Quickly, I realized that I was ill-equipped to serve the amount of neurodivergent learners in my community, and I felt like they needed more and deserved more from me. So I moved back home. I gained a ton of experience in multisensory evidence-based curriculums and program implementation. I was with Lindy Mood Bell Learning Processes for over a decade. And then I spread my wings and opened my private practice and earned some experience in Morton Gillingham, Wilson Reading Systems, Step Up to Writing, Social Thinking, Making Math Real. I really wanted to personalize and differentiate my recommendations and implementation thereafter, partnered with several different schools in the local area and pediatricians practice, and really had a chance to refine the art of implementation, both from my personal one-on-one and group perspective, but also as one who oversees educational specialists. So now at Learnfully, I have the privilege of helping preserve the fidelity of implementation, making sure that our learners' needs are being met holistically and wholeheartedly, that we are providing personalized instruction across the board in one of the many programs that we offer, and then monitoring progress over time to ensure that everyone has the information they need to serve the learner in the way they deserve. So without further ado, I love to turn the mic over to Erin Luchterhand, and she will tell you all about her experience as an educational specialist.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erin Luchterhand. I live in Green Bay, Wisconsin, so smack dab in the Midwest, and have for a long time. I grew up in the States, so we love it here. But I have been an education specialist for over 12 years, the last 5 all virtual and online. And so I've had the privilege of just developing programs, really working to kind of figure out where the needs lie with our learners and meet those needs in really creative ways. In the last year and a half, nearly almost 2 years, I've been with Learnfully, and it's just been a huge blessing as a teacher to work with our students here at Learnfully, but it's been a blessing for my family as well. My husband and I also have 4 children, and we homeschool, so that's an adventure in and of itself. But it's so cool to be able to use everything that I've learned as a teacher and just supporting my own children that way as well.
Yes, Erin is definitely a homeschooling resource. If you ever have questions about that, please reach out. I'm happy to help as well. I forgot to mention that I have 4 children. Just that little caveat. And they're all neurodivergent in their own right. So I feel like I was gifted this opportunity to be on this career path because I was set up for success with my own children. Thank you for that, Erin. I appreciate it. Okay, Tiffany, take it away.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Tiffany Wells, and I'm a dyslexia interventionist and an education specialist with Learnfully. I started my career in education about 10 years ago, very much like Jess, wanting to just jump in and change the world. And then I realized how diverse the world is, and we need a lot more answers than what we could find in the classroom. I taught reading for many years. It's my passion. I love it. And I saw what our children were struggling with when it came to reading. So I switched over to the dyslexia side. It had always fascinated me. And I've learned so much more about the reading process thanks to that transition. I am now transitioning out of the classroom. I'm actually not in the classroom anymore, sort of. It's a long story. We won't go into it, but I've been with Learnfully for almost a year now, and I will say it is phenomenal what these people have been able to do, not just for our clients, but for each other. because I'm neurodivergent myself. I am super ADHD, and I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot about how to just meet those learners' needs in ways that I didn't even know before as a classroom teacher. So Learnfully has been as awesome for me as it has for our clients as well. And I just feel really blessed to be a part of the team. And I can't wait to talk about dyslexia.
Yeah, let's do it.
That's my
jam. Well, first, we're going to start with why, as we always do at Learnfully. I appreciate both your introductions. Thank you. Our why is really enmeshed, ingrained in our mission and our core values. Through these values, growth, possibilities, community, partnership, and connections, we know that and recognize that every learner learns differently. And it is our passion, our mission to ensure that every learner learns fully to their full potential, that not only do they reach, but they realize that full potential so that it becomes a lifelong positive trajectory, lifelong learning trajectory. Learnfully is really, I'm sure you've done your research, you've heard of us before, but we're essentially comprised of a highly curated network of educational specialists. So we have a multiplicity of multisensory, evidence-validated programming that we implement in flexible formats, utilizing educational therapists and executive functioning coaches. So the network of our educational specialists is comprised of quite a diverse population of different credentials, certification, personality to match to ensure that we can engage your learner both online and or in person based on what the learner needs. And then, of course, we differentiate all of our implementation and ensure that caregivers and educators who surround that learner at the center of all of our mission and model is to ensure that they have the communication, that they have the updates they need so that they can meet the learner consistently with repetition. As we know, those tend to lead to the highest level of results. So we're all about the match and ensuring that our educational specialists are matched to the learner based on their expertise, as well as their charisma, interests, strengths, and passion. It's because that will, of course, expedite progress all along the way. So in that mission, we really want to support learners with and with a diagnosis, with and without a diagnosis, I should say. So assuredly, we have quite a few learners who warrant a diagnosis, and we want to celebrate all of their differences. We know that the number 1 in 5 is actually quite low. We have surveyed caregivers and found that up to 42% of caregivers believe that their children have a learning difference or disability. And in fact, understood.org during the pandemic surveyed caregivers and found out that 75% of them believe that their learner learns differently. So we're here to support learners of all needs, and those who may not have a diagnosis may show some of those symptoms and signs. So we want to treat those in a way that hopefully moves them on a positive path to their potential. It doesn't necessarily warrant a diagnosis. So the 1 in 5, the 20% is quite a low number. We know those are who have been diagnosed. That doesn't necessarily represent those who show the signs and symptoms of these diagnoses that we're going to dive into in just a quick minute. So what is Dys, right? And I only play with that word because in the first week of our LDA webinar series, we defined the common terminology in the LDA space. And part of that was dysfunction. And so I wanted to start by giving you an overview, and you may all know this, but just as to refresh your memory, the definition of Dys is that it is difficult, painful, and unfavorable. Now, that kind of has a negative connotation, and we want to try to steer away from the negativity around a diagnosis. I'm really proud to say that society has taken quite a turn and a shift, and now those who receive the diagnoses that are listed below that involve this prefix actually feel quite empowered by their diagnosis and really want to lean in to what may be seen as unfavorable and show that they have quite a few strengths. So not to focus so much on the Dys per se, but just know that these diagnoses are grouped because a learner is facing difficulty in learning in one of these 4 component subskills or capacities. Again, we take a very positive, empowering approach around diagnoses, but know that they can be painful, right? We have to validate and recognize that these are challenges for our learners. Okay, so let's do it. We're going to dive in. We're going to alternate and take turns explaining to you what these diagnoses are, the symptoms, the signs, and then for each diagnosis, because we only have about 30 minutes, we're going to break down 5 top tips for each one. So you can take notes, but again, we're going to send you the recording. You can screenshot it, do what you need to do. But know that we want you to be present and fully engaged. So don't feel like you have to memorize everything we're saying. All right. So I'm going to turn the mic to Tiffany to kick us off with dyslexia.
Okay. So, Jess is right on the money with the low number. Dyslexia affects 5 to 17% of our students, and that is low. It really does depend on where you are in the country as well, because some states don't treat it the same way. That's one of the biggest hurdles that I've come across working with Learnfully, is the differences across the country. But it is a language-based learning difference. It's not a vision issue, it's a language issue. And it's where the person has difficulty with the process of reading, but also interpreting what they've read. So not only are they struggling to actually read, they are then struggling to remember what they've read. A dyslexic learner may struggle with phonemic awareness, may have issues with decoding, fluency, that choppy type of reading, their comprehension, spelling, handwriting is often a big thing as well. The thing with dyslexia also is that it runs on a continuum. It's a spectrum. So it's not going to look the same for everyone. And they may be able to read beautifully and not be able to tell you a thing about it afterwards. So it really just does depend on the learner. And that's what's beautiful about Learnfully, because we do tailor it to what they need. I love being able to do that. The diagnosis can impact organization in the brain that controls that processing, the way the language is heard, the way it's read. It really is a processing issue. And then we're dealing with working memory and attention and organization, which starts to sound like other things, because there are comorbidities when it comes to dyslexia and all of our learning differences. So it's sometimes difficult to pin down what exactly is going on. But being proactive is a beautiful thing. And knowing when to just say, hey, something's up, we need to take some steps. Especially with the pandemic, we have had a lot of learners feel that slide, especially on the foundational, the basics. Mm-hmm. So all of you who are here, I cheer you on. Good job.
I do appreciate you saying that it's a continuum, because, oh gosh, isn't it? I mean, it is truly a spectrum, because the typical traditional diagnosis, right, when we were all just getting trained in teaching, was, oh, they just swap their letters. Oh, they read backwards. Like these very, like the very typical signs are not necessarily the symptoms and signs that we see. Because that's actually, to flip your letters, your B's and D's, your P's and Q's, is developmentally appropriate until about 8 years of age. And so oftentimes caregivers will see that happening. I've seen it in my own kids, and I'm totally guilty of this. I automatically jump to, oh my gosh, my child's dyslexic. But in reality, right, you have to see if we'll give you some tips, but you have to see if they are receptive and responsive to those strategies over time, before you then dive into further analysis.
That mode of thinking, I mean, people have thought that for years, and it's understandable. And I get why, but research and time has shown, that this is a brain thing. It's a processing issue. Back when they thought it was visual, there were all these other strategies and things that they did, but now they know that it's processing, because your brain is actually registering those letters quicker than your eyes, which is pretty fascinating if you ever want to research the brain. It's pretty amazing. And speaking about that, I know we have to be quick, but I do want to say that dyslexia, often, if you don't know that your learner has it, it comes across as maybe lack of motivation, and it's not. It's not laziness or lack of motivation, or that they just don't want to do it. Their brain is working 10 times harder than the average student. So they're tired, just trying to get those basic things done with reading. They're exhausted. And if you don't know that that's what they have, and if their educators don't know, their teachers don't know, then it can look like, they don't want to do it, because it's hard and they are tired and they do kind of want to give up. So I just want to point that out, because
That's a great point for all these diagnoses, is that oftentimes they're grouped in as a learner is just facing lassitude or unmotivated, but in reality, the comorbidity affects it, the inattention possibly along with the diagnoses, but they're on overdrive for sure. So they kind of hit their wall, of rightfully so, early on, because they're working so hard. And, I realized then the flip of the script is dyslexic learners, and again, I'm not going to make any generalities, but dyslexic learners tend to be super conceptual, super bright, super creative, right? So they have a ton of strengths that need validation and bolstering just as much, if not more, than these areas of concern, because we want them to feel empowered in who they are as a learner and advocate for some of these strategies. So next up is Erin talking us through there's so many strategies, but we really had to group them down to 5 so that you could have some quick grabs, some snackables. Go for it, Erin.
So I love all of these. I'm going to focus on the last one in just a minute, primarily, but really when you're working with students with dyslexia, you want to focus on that multisensory input. They're using their brain, right? Like Tiffany just said, it's 10 times harder. So giving them multiple ways to get that information into their brain is super important. They should be using their hands. They should be using their bodies. They should be using their eyes, their ears, all of it. Giving them choice is also a huge important strategy that you can use with your dyslexic learners. This is hard for them. Giving them an element of control is going to increase that motivation and that work ethic a ton. So any choices in your activities that you can give to them is going to really emphasize their willingness to put in the work, right? Because if this is hard for me, why do I want to put in the work? If I can have a choice, I'm much more willing. You want to present new information in manageable chunks. So this is going to look different for different students, right? Like I might be able to handle this much and the next student might be able to handle this much. You're going to play around with your different learners to see how much they can take in at a time, but you don't want to overwhelm them because this is such heavy information for them. Check for your understanding often and give them the opportunity to recap and review. And this might mean that you go back and review what you have already done maybe 10 lessons ago. Because our learners with dyslexia have to have consistent repetition. And that brings me to that bottom one that I think is so important, is that specific, systematic, and consistent direct instruction. So our learners with dyslexia need consistent repetition, right? I often talk to my students about how it's kind of like a river in your brain, right? Like the more the water flows in a river, the deeper the river gets, the easier it is for that river to flow, right? So the more you do something, the deeper that little groove in your brain is going to be, and the faster that information is going to come quickly to your brain. But you've got to practice with a lot of consistency and a lot of repetition. And so having a systematic program that outlines this and this and this and this with reviews, with drills, in a lot of multisensory ways. So that's something that we do with Orton Gillingham, just as a lot of practice and repetition. And there are some times where I'm like, you know what, we did this lesson 5 weeks ago, but I can tell you're really still struggling with this sound. We're going to go back and review it. And it's not that you don't know the academic concept behind it, but maybe you just need more practice and repetition. So there are ways to frame this in a really positive way for your students. But that repetition, I think, is something that we can't stress enough. With
it's key. And oh my gosh, Erin, what a beautiful analogy with the river. Like I am 1,000% stealing that. Guarantee. Handshake on that. That was brilliant. That was so good and so visual. And I'm so grateful that you frame it in such a positive way. And I just want to note that these strategies, right, you have to try and see what works best for the learner. But tried and true, that bottom bullet point is true across the board. Yeah. You need structured and systematic approaches, and repetition and consistency are key. Now, Erin, I don't know, this is what I hear, but I hear the diagnosis is permanent. Is that a true statement, that dyslexia is a permanent diagnosis?
Dyslexia, and Tiffany can speak to this as well.
Yeah.
But it's something that's always going to be a challenge for students, right? Reading may never be natural or easy, but it's a skill, and skills can be learned and skills can be developed. So with that practice, with that repetition, your students will be able to read. It just may always be difficult for them. It's never going to be something that's like speed. They're going to have to review and have repetition. So Tiffany, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, but that's kind of my approach with it.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true. And, depending on the learner and depending on the severity, it might appear to go away because they're doing so well. They're just doing well, and they're on a different end of the continuum. And for some people, it is going to be harder than others. But with that consistency and that repetition, they all benefit, and they all show progress on their terms by who they are. It's phenomenal, but it's not going away.
That's
So.
right. That's right. True for all of these.
Yeah.
True for all of these. So next up is dysgraphia. Dyslexia, we could talk about that for literally years. So we're going to try our hardest to be as concise as possible. We have other webinars and blogs. Please feel free to resource them on the topic. Dysgraphia. So this is one of those, I don't want to say unique because they're all unique, but this is one of those diagnoses that I think there's a lot of lack of understanding on, lack of awareness. So I'd love, Erin, if you could talk to us a little bit about what it is and some strategies to go along.
Absolutely. Yeah. So dysgraphia, again, affects 7 to 15% of students per the all of the stats and the reports. And it's a language-based difficulty centered more around writing, right? Dyslexia, we know, is that reading component. Well, dysgraphia focuses more on writing, and it can include weakness in spelling, punctuation, things like that. But it can also express weakness and frustration with handwriting, forming letters, getting your thoughts on paper. So I was actually kind of excited to talk about this one just because my son is, I'm not sure, he's a lefty. So, you know, that factors in as well. But this is an area that I'm exploring with him as well because of the frustration around writing and particularly handwriting. Super creative kid, all these ideas, and he will write for days if he dictates to me. But for him to sit down and write like 2 sentences is painful for him. And it's not because he can't do it, but it's all, like we said before with dyslexia, his effort just goes into that. And it is like half an hour for 2 sentences and just painstaking for him. And so it comes along, the issues and the challenges are within forming the letters correctly, like practice a ton, repetition, and then forming the letters. And they can look beautiful for a little bit when that energy is fresh and we have that focus. But then they can be really sloppy. They're not natural, right? You're not picking up those quick strategy, or those quick letter formations. So strategies, I'm going to move right along. We want to increase that fine and gross motor skill in our students. And one way we can do that is through like clay or Play-Doh in the hand, strengthen those hand muscles. I know that some students may have access to occupational therapy or physical therapy, and that can impact that as well. But you really want to strengthen those fine motor skills. You can also do activities such as cursive, might be a little bit more flowy for the student. That can really help. You can also learn typing and audio resources, dictation, things like that. And I think that this ties in with the next strategy, right? Brainstorming your ideas before writing. We want to differentiate with our students with dysgraphia that the content you're writing is different than the handwriting or the act of getting it on paper. So you have this creative idea. Let's validate that. Let's brainstorm that. Let's make sure you know that your ideas are great and you're creative. The challenge is getting it on paper, right? And those are 2 different things. And our students need to understand that so that the whole aspect of writing is not frustrating. So brainstorm ideas with writing, come up with sentences in advance, and then work on the act of getting them on paper. So one way that you can do that, pencil grips, right? So this is just a super cheap one from Amazon. They also have ones that have like a handle that you can hold with your hands right here. And it just helps your student place their hands correctly on the pencil.
I haven't seen the handle one.
I hadn't
That's
either.
great.
A friend of mine has it, and it's like just this plastic piece that comes down and your students hold on to it, and it's genius.
Yeah, it's totally genius.
So yeah, these are great. But anything like that's like, it's going to help your student correctly hold the pencil or the writing utensil. And then additional tools like a slant board, raised or highlighted paper, giving them the visual that they need to follow. Sometimes tracing and then writing can really be helpful. But this is a lot of figuring out what works for each particular student. And I love the idea of the accommodations here with cursive or typing or a dictation, that can be really helpful.
Huge lift. It could be a huge lift because they almost get into this cycle of self-blame. And then once they realize, right, their potential and they see themselves succeed in an alternative way, it really opens up a door of opportunity for them. But this is a physical pain point for them. And so whatever you can do to alleviate that while still addressing it and working on it. I mean, even today, I think most of the adults in this room can agree with me that when I go to write a handwritten note, my hand hurts because I've been keyboarding for so long. So that's another reason why it's so important. I don't even hold it correctly anymore. I just realized as I was doing that, I'm not holding it right. So it's that kind of, that's why you need a lot of consistency and repetition, because they are exposed to so many different modalities. And so balancing the assistive technology with practice and fine motor skills could be really influential. So thank you for that. I appreciate it, Erin. Okay, Tiffany is going to teach us all about dyscalculia. I still have a suspicion that I struggle. I mean, it's permanent. So I still think I have this from when I was a kid. I'd love to learn more from you, Tiff.
Okay, so dyscalculia. Let me tell you about this right here. You know how most people say, oh, I'm a reading person or I'm a math person. Well, imagine having dyslexia and also having dyscalculia. Now your reading is difficult and then your math is difficult, and it's very hard, these poor babies. I do believe these numbers are low, like all the other ones that we've said, but we're learning a lot more about it. There have been a lot of studies because I don't think that they connected dyslexia and dyscalculia together for some reason. But it affects their ability to acquire arithmetical skills, basic computation. They may have difficulty understanding simple number concepts, things that you find easy, like a number line, just basic facts like multiplication facts. They just don't understand how it works. It's a processing issue. Lack an intuitive grasp of numbers. You've done these flashcards over and over and over and over and over again, and they still don't know 8 times 9. Well, it's a challenge for them, trying to recall that memory and trying to bring that to the forefront. It's difficult. Having problems learning number facts and procedures. So I think this also pairs in a lot with dysgraphia, because when they get older, it's really important how they line up their problems, with division, with place value. And if they're already struggling with their handwriting, and dyslexia does affect kind of how things line up, then they're going to have problems with lining up their problems correctly. We had to get one of our kiddos special paper, and it made all the difference because he was able to line everything up. His papers before that were like, what are you doing? What is happening on this paper? And he was brilliant young man. And he really took, it was difficult. We had to do some positive reinforcement with him because he said he felt dumb. And I said, you're not dumb, babe. You're not dumb. We just got to figure out what works for you. And it took some figuring out. But once we did, it was a beautiful thing. As always.
It can be very empowering. It tends to be very empowering. It alleviates and provides answers for our learners, because again, that self-blame cycle happens. It starts to impact their self-esteem and self-worth. And as they get older, oh gosh. So I'm thankful once we catch it early. Again, it's never too late, but I'm thankful if we can't catch it early, because you prevent some of that cascade in anxiety.
Me too. We had a learner last year at the school where I taught, and she had all 3. She had dysgraphia, dyslexia, and dyscalculia. Yeah. And it was tough. Luckily, she was a lighthearted little lady and didn't care about it. So that was wonderful for her. But, when they see other kids in the class just effortlessly going through the day, it wears down on them. So talking and writing out the problems. For students who have dyscalculia, the concepts are abstract. Like, we look at it as something that's concrete, and to them it's not. They don't understand the correlation between the numbers and between the operations. Using visuals, letting them draw out the problem. That's something that they do in the younger grades, and then they shy away from it a little bit as they get older. But if your kiddo has this, your kiddo needs to be able to draw if it works for them. If it works for them.
Totally. I still have to draw it out.
Yeah, me too.
There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. I think there's a big push for automaticity, right? And we all know that.
Right.
But if one can conceptually problem solve and get themselves to the answer, I mean, truly, that's what success looks like to me. That's victorious in life, is that you can problem solve in these real life situations that you're about to talk about. Sorry for stealing your thunder.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I just
it's so key.
Like you said, with the automaticity, we as educators, we do get into that kind of rut of thinking like, okay, they need to memorize this, they need to have this, because in this grade, they're going to have to be able to do this. And that's not false, that's true. But we have to take our neurodivergent learners into account when we're thinking of these things. And we have to realize that they may not be able to do it like everyone else. And that's okay. And yes, that makes our job harder, but oh well, because we need to do what's best for our kiddos. So visuals are huge, manipulatives, and then breaking down the tasks into smaller tasks, especially multi-step problems, word problems. They look at those and they want to run far, far away. Because, I mean, if you have to add and then divide and then subtract just to find the answer, and you're having to read that, just imagine. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like because I don't have these things. So
it's the layers of complexity. I mean, it's a language, it's a paragraph to process, it's language to process. And they always write them in a way that there's extraneous details that you need to physically. So learning strategies on how to eliminate those. And like you said, using manipulatives, circling the numbers, underlining the concept or vocab as a cue. So helpful.
Big time. Manipulatives are, and I mean, manipulatives can be used with anything. You can do them in reading. You can use, they're good to have on hand because they come in handy for so many different things, especially for math, whether or not they're struggling, but reviewing often, especially when there's a new big concept that they've just come upon in school, making sure that you review in chunks with them and kind of see where that displacement's coming, like where are they kind of getting lost, and then you know where to focus. I hope that makes sense, but
yeah, you cycle through it, and it's good to review. I know you mentioned this too, Erin, even if you feel like the learner has it, is independent, it's really good to show them that. Yes. So it's one thing to review concepts that are weak or not yet independent or mastered, but it's also good to review the ones that are, because it gives them that sprinkling of success and really helps them lean in when they're faced with the challenge and really embark on that growth mindset that we know can make a huge difference for our learners.
Share that accuracy with them. I'm always like, you just and you did.
Who cares about the rate? Yeah, it's all about the accuracy.
Yeah,
the rate will come.
One of the progress monitoring tools that I use, I do it every month, and we have 50 words, and we chart how many ever words you were able to read in September, and then we move on, and their eyes light up when they went from 5 words to 15 words. There is nothing better than seeing that they just become so proud of themselves, and then they want to come and they want to do more with you and work harder.
That's the moment, Tiffany. That's the moment I live for.
I love it. That's why I love being a dyslexia interventionist. I love it because there are lots of little moments like that, and you have to, like Erin said, you have to celebrate them. You have to make them big. You gotta, and then the rough stuff. We got it. We're cool.
Yep. Yep. Rapport is everything. Then they trust you. I mean, I could go off. Okay.
I know, right?
Dyspraxia. So I'll take the mic on this one. So dyspraxia has actually been redefined as developmental coordination disorder. That's DCD. Now in the UK, I think I mentioned this on the next slide. In the UK, they still use the word, they still use the terminology dyspraxia. So I want to be universal and inclusive in that way. I would argue that for the last 2 to 3 diagnoses, the number appears low because we're still also facing an awareness challenge. So yes, these are in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. Yes, they're present, but they're renamed as a specific learning disorder. And so as you said, you nailed it, Tiff, like depending on the state, depending on the region, most of the states don't recognize dyspraxia, they recognize DCD. The developmental coordination disorder, these are her learners who just have so many physical challenges. They can't feel or notice themselves in space. They're the ones that have proprioceptive challenges. They throw themselves on the floor. They flop. I had a learner with DCD who would sit in his desk with his legs on the chair behind him. He was in circle time. He was the one with the frog legs. No matter what I did in 5th grade, ladies, he was still in frog legs. So it just depends. I mean, his body and space and how it feels and his flexibility were skewed. And so we had to work from the ground up, and I'll talk about strategies in a moment, but this is truly fine. Yes, but it's mostly gross. And the fine motor can kick in when it comes to speech, right? So dyspraxia can impact our ability to articulate and be able to use that articulatory feedback in our mouth to be able to enunciate and pronounce sounds, patterns, words. So the fine motor can impact writing. That's more dysgraphia. It's really that motor movement in your mouth, that oral fine motor and the physical growth motor that are impacted the most for dyspraxia and DCD. So what are the 5 key strategies? Everyone's different. I know we've said that, but repetition's key. Stretch, just like you do for dysgraphia. You want to stretch. You want to get all these learners moving. Let's be honest. Sensory movement breaks are key for them resetting and re-energizing. But this technology kicks in quite a bit with DCD and dyspraxia. So utilizing keyboarding, utilizing different flexible seating in the classroom. So having space where some like to sit on those spinny chairs, some like to sit on those bubble cushions, some like to sit on a pillow on the ground, even though everyone else is in a chair, some like to stand, right? It really does depend on the learner and where their body is feeling most supported and most engaged in that space. So it could change every day. And as teachers, we are aware and are flexible around that. Try different things. Again, every learner is different. So you can try the different paper that we noted with dysgraphia. They have bumpy paper where there's raised lines. There's 3 raised lines. There's 2 raised lines. It just depends. They're color coded. There's a red line on top, a yellow on the bottom, a dotted line in the middle that's blue. So try different paper, different utensils, different options for their body, but also recognize the key on this one, again, repetition, consistency, yes. But the key is to give them freedom to move. Allow them space to discover what works best for their body, because you can only imagine how distracting it is to be for 6+ hours a day in an environment where your body hurts, right? You can't possibly spend any cognitive mental energy learning if you're distracted by how your body feels in that space. So it's giving them opportunity to explore different methodologies, using repetition and consistency once you discover what works best for that learner, and having flexibility and patience, because sometimes those strategies ebb and flow throughout the year. Sometimes it takes years to find what works best. Anything you want to add on this, ladies?
I'll jump in. So I have an almost 6-year-old who has apraxia of speech, which is comparable to dyspraxia. It's all kind of related. And she was silent at 2.5, and we couldn't figure it out. And so finally we dove right into speech therapy, and she was in birth through 3 and now has had an IEP since then. And she's had to figure out how to make the sounds with her mouth. So it was that motor planning within her mouth. Like you said, she's smart as a whip, right? Like she's in kindergarten and we homeschool. So she's like almost done with kindergarten early, and she's just beautiful and smart. But that language, she has had to learn how to make the sound And we had to kind of push when she was real little and say, no, you don't get to grunt. You don't get to point. You have to attempt the sound. And she has gone from that into now conversational and friendly and making friends in social situations. And now we're working on articulation. So that's huge, like it's been 3 years of speech therapy. And so it's a huge process for these kiddos. She's a big movement girl too, right? Like if she gets her movement in during the day, we see so many less behaviors. So I love this because you get to see that growth, right? So we celebrate, like Tiffany said earlier, we celebrate the little things. Those little things are huge things. And that's where the motivation continues. And that's how we continue to encourage our kiddos.
Yes.
And so that's just been really, as a parent, been really, really neat to see, and something we are still working on, but it's a beautiful thing to see these kiddos grow, because it's huge, right?
It is huge. And I thank you so much for saying that, because every small step is actually a big step. And I'm constantly saying, okay, parents, small steps to big goals. But in reality, it's like big goals to like victorious goal. Like it's like this huge monumental, right, thing for them to make a certain sound that we take for granted. It takes a lot of effort. And I commend you, Erin, teacher mom.
I wanted to jump in real quick and say something about some of our older learners who have this and deal with this. You'll often see that it seems like they're being not intentionally disruptive, but they don't understand their body in space and time. And so they might be the ones who are constantly bumping into other kids, bumping into things. They're not doing it on purpose. And so we have to have that understanding and awareness, and they have to have that understanding and awareness as well. So they know that they're not doing it on purpose, if that makes sense. Because
1000%. Yep, that totally makes sense.
They self-blame very quickly.
For sure. Mm-hmm.
Big time. And so if they understand this is what's going on, and then their educators understand, and everybody's working together, then we can avoid that, especially with our older learners, because they're going through those hormonal changes, and self-esteem is already, and we want to boost that up as much as possible. So I love these strategies. These are great.
Thank you for saying that, because this totally is the kid who runs into kids all the time in the hallway and has no like awareness or no intention on doing it. Thank you for saying it. And as they get older, they're the ones that kind of get like, pushed back, and then things just start escalating at that point. So being aware, thankfully we're in a time where a lot of students are becoming more aware of each other and what each other is going through. But the more you can spread cognizance on why things are happening and that everyone's different, and we embrace those differences, the better for the student. So thanks for noting that. I appreciate it. All right, so we've talked a lot about Learnfully services. I'll do this in brief, but essentially we want to ensure you, caregivers, educators, that we start from your lens. So we start from a caregiver's perspective, an educator's perspective, and we want to really pinpoint where the breakdown in their processing skills and beyond are happening. And so we start with the questionnaire. And if they haven't had a recent assessment, we offer our Spark Learning Assessment. That assessment can focus on cognition and executive functioning solely, or it can also incorporate aptitude portions like literacy and math, so we can really get to the heart of what's happening for that learner, and then make an instructional plan based on their learning profile. So we talk about that through the consultation with the caregiver. We invite any outside party who wants to collaborate with us to be part of any and all conversations with us, but especially the consultation and those monthly progress update meetings we have, because we want to ensure that there's consistency, as we said, and that we're matching the learner's needs. We delineate macro and micro objectives based on their capabilities, their potential, their struggles, their interests, their strengths, the whole beautiful picture. And then we measure that progress over time and offer you weekly and monthly communication towards their goals. Again, we offer educational therapy, which is, I think, a brilliant blend of academics and social emotional support. We also offer executive functioning coaching. We can do that one-on-one or in a class format. Quite honestly, those two tend to go hand in hand. 80 to 90% of our learners have both educational therapy and some executive functioning coaching in place, because we know there's quite a bit of a comorbidity. I'm super excited for next week's webinar, because we're going to actually do a deep dive into ADHD and executive dysfunction. So we'll talk more and more about that comorbidity when we meet next week. And then we also have some more of an application phase program. We have academic tutoring, which is more of a generalization phase. They lay the foundation of educational therapy or EF coaching, and then we help them apply their skills to homework, school-oriented tasks, projects, things like that. We offer flexible and accessible formats. So we're virtual if it's in the best interest of the learner. We can be in person. We support schools, and we have partnerships at local schools where we can meet with them after school. We can offer classes. We have an executive functioning boot camp, one that focuses on organization and one that focuses on mindset and self-regulation. We have another one coming up in January that's all about strength finding. I'm so excited about it. We can offer parent-led, we offer caregiver coaching, we have asynchronous formats. It's really, truly what's in the best interest of your child, your learner, so that we can put them on a positive path towards their own strong, full potential. So how can you get involved? LDA is going to come and go. The Awareness Month is going to come and go, but we're spreading awareness all year long. So feel free to reach out to these organizations. Some are local, some are regional or international, like the Dyslexia Association. Understood.org is an amazing nonprofit that is a huge resource for our community. So please feel free to dive into their resources. And then we have a ton of information on our website too. We have over 100 blogs. We have quite a few webinars on YouTube. Feel free to dive into our socials too, because there's quite a bit of information there for you to discover and explore. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, attendees, for being here. We are so grateful and so proud, so honored that we can really support this community in such a special way. Don't hesitate to reach out. Feel free to email us, call us, text us, follow us on socials, chat us through our website. We're here for you, and we look forward to seeing you next week for ADHD and executive dysfunction. Thank you so much for joining us.